Welcome back to the Live for Life podcast. And I've just about recovered from the last episode where I was grilled by the dog, but now it's my turn. How are you feeling, G-Dog?
Very apprehensive. Angus has done this to me before about, I don't know, 4 years ago, 3 years ago? I don't know what it was, when you had your own podcast and you interviewed me. And that I think that was the first time I'd ever been interviewed about my personal life by anybody. So I'm bizarrely even more nervous now than I was then. I don't know why. I think because Angus now knows me even better.
I think there's a bit of that. I went into the obviously interview we did last week and I felt nerves like I'd never felt before because of you just knowing so much more about me. But it went very well. So I'm sure this one will as well, do you think? But anyway, we're going to kick things off with the fact that we obviously both grew up at different times, about 10, 15 minutes from each other. And so my first question is for you, your early years, how of what you remember was life growing up from the ages of when you were born to 10 years old?
I would say that I had a very happy childhood, but I lacked close male friendships, I think. There's something that is, I don't know why it's seared in my mind, but my best friend was a guy called Richard. And I think at the age of, it might have been like 4 or 5 or 6 years old, he was one of our neighbors, lived a few hundred meters from where I lived, and he left and moved away. And I think in hindsight, that had a big impact on me, that someone that was very, very close to just disappeared. And it's weird to think that at the age of 5 or 6 it can have an impact. But I think it was quite a pivotal age because I'd just started school. And suddenly, therefore, I had to sort of create a whole new friendship community at a very early stage in life. And I always felt like I was a little bit of a loner throughout my, I think definitely in my teens. The primary school I went to until the age of 11 was very near to where my parents live. And Angus knows the area well because we went to visit it earlier this year. So I could walk to school. But I think that was a pivotal moment.
And were you a confident or shy kid?
I think I became more shy, strangely. I think earlier on, I was pretty confident. And I think as I became a teenager, I became more shy. I don't really know why, but I moved to a school in a town called Leyland, which is, I had to get a bus to school. And I was academically fine. I mean, I wasn't as bad as you.
Savage.
So we at school, we had a streaming system. And this is the primary school. And if you were a Spitfire, you were the sort of dunces. If you were a Tornado, you were sort of middling. And if you were Concorde, you were the best in the class. And I was always about Tornado. So I think all the way through my school life, I was that middling sort of kid. And so academically, there was never an issue. I didn't have the challenges that you had at school, but I had much more of a challenge socially.
Were you bullied?
Yeah. So probably from the age of 13, 14 until the age of 16, I repeatedly was beaten up. Names called. I really don't understand why it was. And the circle of friends that I had when I was at school were the sort of the square kids. I was never, ever the cool guy. I was always it was very much the opposite of you. I was always the guy that was academically middling and socially pretty square.
Do you think your feelings towards the North because you're slightly running away from those feelings because of what you went through?
Unquestionably. I mean, absolutely. I mean, whenever you and I talk about our childhood, I mean, when we were up there, Angus and I had this incredible day because we drove up together in his car.
It was an amazing weekend,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
And we went to visit my parents. And my parents are in their 80s. My dad has got early stage Alzheimer's. My mum has got a problem with her hip. And they live now in a small 3-bedroom semi-detached house on a small cul-de-sac in a village. And then after that, we went to visit Angus's childhood home, which is a sprawling old rectory next to a cricket pitch, literally a 15-minute drive from my house, and yet night and day in terms of sort of social status. And his family's obviously very famous in the area where we live. And I think as we drove to my parents' house, Angus, you said to me, geez, you've come a long way, G-Dog.
I was more impressed than anything. And I think that's something I'm going to get into later in the podcast. But with your parents, is there anything they instilled in you that you still use today?
My dad's work ethic. I mean, I think in that sense, we share a commonality that my dad, I wouldn't see him in the morning because he'd go to work before I went to school. He'd get home maybe at 7 in the evening. Quite often we'd already had supper, or tea as we called it then, before he got home. And quite regularly he would have to do a bit of work in the evening at home. Quite regularly he'd have to go into the office on a Saturday. And so I definitely got a sort of a work ethic instilled from my dad. My mum always had part-time jobs. So she was a childminder for a while, looking after other people's children. She worked in a Warburton's bakery. So in the village where we lived, bizarrely, I think Warburton's for some strange period very early in the stage had actual retail outlets, or it was very strange. But
We'll have to do a deep dog dive.
Yeah, I know. I've got to have to ask your dad about this. But she's convinced that your dad came into her shop and she met him in the 1980s or something. I don't know. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those strange sort of like, moments in history when two things collided.
Collide, yeah.
And then suddenly 30 years later, they collide again. It's very strange. But yeah, so I think that sort of work ethic from both my parents definitely stuck with me.
Was there ever an expectation to follow a certain path?
Actually, no. I think my parents never... I think I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me. And I haven't asked him this, but I think I was the easy child and my brother was the more difficult one. My brother was more academically a bit of a refusenik. And I sort of, just did my exams, worked. My parents couldn't really help me with my schoolwork, so I just worked out other ways of getting help from other people. I didn't go to boarding school, so yeah, I think, yeah, that's fine.
And the reason I said G's when we obviously rocked up to where you grew up was because I kind of was in admiration of what you've achieved. You are extremely humble about it, and you don't seem to see it as this big deal that you've got to where you have got to. But how the hell have you done it? And you've probably never been asked that before, but...
I think I am... There's always a bit of luck in these things. Perhaps up until the past decade, maybe until I was married, I don't know. I've almost constantly escaped from things. So that bullying thing at school meant that I always want to escape. I wanted to escape from Lancashire. So the first opportunity to get out at the age of 18, when I went to university, that was the big escape. Then I reinvented myself at the age of 18. You move away from home, you move away from the social group, you arrive as a completely fresh, sort of cleansed person. You can recreate your entire character without any of the emotional baggage. People don't know you. You can reframe yourself. They don't know you as the square kid anymore. They just know you as this guy Graham who's just arrived from Lancashire. They don't know anything about you. So I made a deliberate effort to literally reinvent myself. And I remember the first friend that I had at the age of 18 was this massive rugby player. And it's the absolute antithesis of everything that I was. It's called David. And I met him on the bus to my university. So I just arrived down there, and for somehow, I don't know whether we sat next to each other, and we both realized that we were both getting the bus to the university together from our... Many people lived in student accommodation. We lived in separate houses. I lived in a bedsit with a senile old woman and a couple of other people, and I was on my own. And bizarrely, I loved it because I was just away and I'd escaped, and this is an amazing thing. And he had the similar situation. And so I think we just bonded over that. And it was just the antithesis of every other friendship I'd ever had in my life. A big, sporty guy. It was like so different. And that's when my reinvention started.
Isn't it interesting that a rugby player impacted both
That's a good point.
our teams as well? I just literally clocked that. But I think one question I'd love to ask is, that kid who was bullied, what would you say to him?
I didn't stand up for myself. There was a moment when I did, and maybe that was when I was 15, 16, and that was a pivotal moment when things started to change. But I used to just allow people to hit me. I remember one particular moment when I was in the playground, and two of the people who were bullying me were just punching me and kicking me, and I didn't fight back. I just sat there and allowed them to punch me in the face and kick me, and there was a big group of people all surrounding us shouting scrap, and I was petrified of being put into detention. So I thought, if I react to this and fight back, then it will be a fight and we will all get put into detention. If I just sit here and allow myself to be beaten up, then they'll be put in detention. I wasn't. Didn't work. I got put in detention as well. But I think I should have fought back, and maybe I should have taken up some self-defense classes or learned judo or something like that. But I just didn't fight back. It's extraordinary, really.
There was never a moment where you said enough is enough.
Well, there was one moment eventually when I said enough is enough, and that was when they started to use the end of compasses to stab me in my quad in the chemistry classes and biology classes, and the pain was just so bad, and my leg was bleeding, that every time I went to the chemistry class and we were sat around the chemistry table, they'd choose to sit on each side of me, these two particular bullies. And they would, Gareth and Michael, still remember their names, and each of them would take turns to the end of a compass, like us, if you have for drawing geometry with. One would stab me in one quad with the compass, and the other would stab me in the other quad. And I would, obviously, under my trousers, I knew I was bleeding, and I just sat there and ignored it and just took the pain. And then I just decided enough was enough. And at the end of the day, I waited for Michael to go back to our form room to collect his bag or his books from his desk. And Angus knows the story. I just picked him up I grabbed him. I don't know where I got the strength from. I grabbed him around the leg. I turned him upside down and I banged his head on the floor. And he didn't bully me again after that. But that was after just years of bullying, and I just thought, I can't cope with this anymore.
So obviously you left school, went to university. University, what happened after that?
So I was very lucky in the sense that I did economics at university, and I built an amazing bond with my macroeconomics lecturer. I had a great social life at uni. I had some amazing friends. I'm not saying we were the coolest people, but we were the polar opposite of what I was at school. We were a group of people that everybody wanted to be friends with. It was great. Everything was cool. We had a great time. We spent too much money, got into a lot of debt, and we did fun stuff, like we'd go to Paris, we'd go to Greece, and all this sort of stuff when everyone would be scrimping and saving. Instead, we got a group of people who just wanted to have fun, and so we had a really, really good time. I joined a canoeing club, I joined a rowing club, and we were always at the bars in the evening. So it was the absolute polar opposite of what I was like at school. I completely reinvented myself. And then I built this great relationship with my macroeconomics lecturer. I don't know why, but we just got on. And he said, I'm going to have a competition to see who can get a summer internship in the financial district of London, the city. And I was just determined to get this. And I ended up winning it. And that got me, at the age of 19, an internship in the financial district. And that was obviously life-changing, because suddenly I was really passionate about the financial markets. I got this internship and it made me even more excited about it. And that is where my career began.
And then obviously you went abroad.
So then it was very difficult, because it was then a huge recession in the UK. It was a very, very bad economic environment. And it was very difficult to get jobs as a new grad, as it indeed is now as well. But eventually I did get a job, and it was working for a Japanese bank. And I didn't realize at the time that was the worst possible moment to join a Japanese bank, because Japan was like absolutely collapsing, and they started making everybody redundant, and it was terrible. And so I suddenly thought, God, at the moment at which I've actually had all of these escapes and finally got some success and finally got this job, suddenly it could all literally just go, because I get made redundant at the age of 21. So I went into a sort of flight or fight mode. And I went up to my boss and I said, I know you're trying to grow away from Japan. How about transferring me to Asia? Because that was my panic. How can I get out of a recession-hit London, working for a Japan bank when the Japan economy is collapsing? How can I escape this? And so he said no. And so I went into a really, really bad phase, that everything was falling apart, that I was going to get made redundant, that I'd be stuck in London. It might be a nightmare. I'd have to move back to Lancashire. The ultimate hell in my imagination was having to move back to Lancashire. The idea that I would fail in life and have to move back and live with my parents because I didn't have any money, I couldn't afford to live in London, it was just petrifying. And then a couple of weeks later, he just called me over to his desk and said, I can't send you to Hong Kong, but I'm sending you to Singapore. And it was just this unbelievable elation. I didn't know what the hell Singapore was. I didn't care.
The little boy from rural Lancashire.
Yeah. all I cared about was that I was getting away from this recession, a horrible UK situation in a firm which is making everybody redundant. And so I moved to Singapore, and the next reinvention happened. So I didn't know anybody. I was working for a company where everybody was Japanese and Chinese. So I was the only Westerner arriving in this company in Singapore, which I didn't even go for a reconnaissance. I'd never been there in my life. I didn't know anything about it. And suddenly I was living there. And he said, you're going to go there for 2 years, and there'll be a 1 year potential to come back if you don't like it or whatever. You've got to be there at least 1 year. So I just arrived there and stayed in this hotel where I was being put up until I found a flat. And I didn't know anybody, but I knew I was going to be there for 2 years. And it was amazing feeling that this suddenly the world is my oyster. I was like 13 hours flight away from the UK, I could completely reinvent. I love this idea of permanent reinvention. I'm like this butterfly that's constantly sort of like a chrysalis. And I ended up meeting this group of Danish people. It was so weird. I ended up meeting them at some outside eating place called a hawker center in Singapore because everybody there was Chinese and there was a Westerner sitting there. So I just sat next to this Westerner, and it turns out he was there with 3 of his Danish mates, and they became my best mates suddenly.
You talk a lot about reinventing yourself. How does one do that successfully?
Listen. So you reinvent yourself by being completely open to new experiences, by being completely open to other people. And by definition, if you talk about yourself, you're not reinventing yourself because you are your history. So what you have to do is learn to listen to other people. And everybody likes talking about themselves. So I've learned throughout my entire life that it's a great way to get ahead in life just by listening to other people. If you spend your entire life talking about yourself, then you end up staying the same because you're just talking about what you are. Whereas if you listen to other people and experience different things, then you're personally developing.
Just over 7 years ago now was obviously the start of another reinvention. When you were walking to the PT studio 7 or so years ago, and it was our first session coming up, is there anything you distinctly remember that was going through your mind?
It was a beautiful autumn day. I think it was in September, right? And you were in this gym called Fort Gym, which was a 10-minute walk from my house. I'd been following you on Instagram for a few weeks, and so I thought I knew a bit about you to be able to judge what it was going to be. And I thought, this is the sort of person I can probably get on with. And it was quite exciting because my wife had cancelled the membership to the gym that I had before because she didn't think I was using it enough because I was spending so much time in my office gym. Well, I was going to my office gym 2 days a week during the week at lunchtime or the evening. And at the weekend, during the summer in particular, I'd be running instead of going to the gym. And so she said, you're not going to this gym. It's very expensive. I'm just canceling the membership. And so I knew that Angus was critical to my fitness because he had the gym membership. And so the way I was going to go to the gym was being with Angus. And I remember just arriving, and it's obviously this trepidation because you feel like you know somebody because you've seen them on social media, but what are they going to be like in real life? What if he's actually a complete idiot? You just don't know. Because there's a risk that someone with a social media presence like you had is going to be some real arrogant person in real life, and you don't know. And I was just hoping that you were going to be a good guy. And I walked in through the door, and I think you were sitting in a chair waiting for me, and you're very, very good at first impressions. You got a firm handshake, you connect with someone at eye level, you smile, you've got a very expressive, friendly face, and you just instantly, everyone says this that I know that knows you instantly make people feel good when you meet them. And so that was a great start. And then also you do what I've just said, and you ask me questions. And so I thought, okay, this is someone actually who is not going to be instructing me. This is someone who wants to get to know me, and they're going to make me better by understanding what I'm like now. And that was the key moment when I thought this is really going to last.
And in the first few months, was there anything in particular other than that really surprised you?
the fact that you started to advise me on stuff way more than fitness, literally fashion sense, clothing. I think all sorts of stuff like that, and also I would bring friends along to train with you, right?
Yeah.
Tim came along, Eddie came along. We ended up training with my friends, and I started to surprise myself that I was literally bringing you into my life in a broader way rather than just being a PT relationship. I was introducing you to my friends. And that's obviously happened in spades since for both sides. Yeah. I now know your mates, you know, my mates, you know, each other's families, everything. And that really surprised me. I never expected that from a trainer relationship. Obviously it's changed now, but at the beginning, I never expected that.
I think one of the most special moments, well, many special moments we had, was I used to love on the Saturday morning, we used to obviously walk up together up the road, and we would chat for half an hour to an hour and just talk about anything. And we kind of created this friendship without even realizing, didn't we?
That's so true. Yeah,
it was fun. Do you remember? We used to sit
thanks
at the
for
end of the
reminding me
street?
about that. I used to look forward to that so much. So Angus and I used to have this 1 hour on Saturday morning, which I really started. It used to be one of the highlights of the week, where we trained together. But then, equally importantly, perhaps more importantly, at the end of the training session, he would walk the dog from the gym to the end of my road before you then went off. I think you even had a scooter, right?
Yeah, I would walk the scooter.
So you would walk with the scooter, and we'd have this sort of 10-minute chat post-training session about, you know, what was going on in our lives. And then you'd head off and I'd go home. And so that 10-minute chat compounds over time, and we got to know each other much better and better and better. So it's true that walk was quite an important part of the beginning of our relationship. Yeah.
Well, actually, I would say it was a lot of the time we were much longer than 10 minutes when we just stood there, and it was a Saturday morning. A lot of the time I had Graham at 8 and then I had someone at 10, so I had to be somewhere for 10. But when I didn't, you kind of just be nattering away, and that was that. But I guess going through our journey that we've had together, has there been any pivotal moments where you've just thought, wow, this is way more than client PT?
Oh, so many. I think one of the pivotal moments is when we decided to have dinner together, right? That was a big thing.
You were baffled.
I was baffled because you suggested it. And so what was it? Was it before Christmas? When was it? What was the moment? There was some moment when you said, let's have dinner together. And I was like, I just thought it was very odd. I was like, why would I want to have dinner with Angus? He's my trainer. You know? And that obviously was a real pivotal moment when suddenly, because even on those walks back from the gym, we talk about what's going on in our lives and all that sort of stuff, but it was related to fitness. And obviously we talk about family and stuff, but I almost felt when we go out for dinner together, are we going to have anything to talk about? Is it going to be just like, and also I was slightly paranoid that we wouldn't get on, that we're getting on in a training session, we're getting on that sort of 10-minute walk. And this relationship was becoming so important to me that if we'd had dinner together and didn't get on, it would have been the beginning of the end. So I was almost nervous about taking that extra step because it might all go wrong.
Do you know what that was?
I think that. Do I know why that was?
Yeah, as in why.
I think it goes back to my childhood. I mean, I really think that there's in every one of us there is this inner voice, which is remembering things that happened in childhood. And I just think maybe that day when that guy Richard, when I was 6 years old, moved away, and then even when I was in Singapore, my best friend relocated after 2 years to Australia. Actually, no, to Tokyo. And so I'd gone through a series of building incredibly close relationships with people and then suddenly them moving on or disappearing somewhere else. And I didn't want that to happen with you. And it's strange because at that point it was very much a sort of PT client relationship, but I could see it was developing and I didn't want that to happen.
What do you think older and younger men could teach each other that has been pivotal to the success of our friendship?
Obviously it's listening, right? So I think from the beginning, I ignored your age. I was self-conscious about my age, but I ignored your age. So for in my mind, we were complete equals. I was always subconsciously nervous that in your mind we weren't, and that because you were my trainer and it was a client-trainer relationship, there was a lack of symbiosis in the relationship, that you saw me as a client and I was increasingly seeing you as a friend. And that therefore, I think sometimes in male relationships, you need to just be willing to drop the barrier and just treat each other as complete equals. And the intergenerational thing is really a perfect example of that, where you can teach each other so much. I mean, I've learned so much from you about whether it's politics, whether it's relationships, whether it's social media, in addition to fitness and nutrition. And there's just so many different things. And I think you've learned a lot from me in many ways as well. And you can, the symbiosis of an intergenerational relationship is very, very powerful. And you literally have made me younger, physically and mentally.
Obviously, the big change I've seen more than anything, and I spoke about it when you interviewed me, is the lack of self-belief one has. And obviously, I was nowhere near the level of being able to read it 7 years ago as I am now in someone. But when I think back to it, you were one of those people that on the outside, very confident, successful career. But then once we delved a bit deeper, actually, there were internal battles you were facing and actually insecurities and self-belief that you didn't have. So what are key things that you've learned throughout our friendship, throughout your training journey, that have brought this true self-belief that you have now that you once didn't?
It's a good question, God. Because it's true, there's been a massive transformation. Being physically more confident is huge. So when you look in the mirror and you know you look stronger, you know you look more physically powerful, it changes your self-perception. Also, our friendship makes me feel more confident as well. I feel cool because of you. It's that sort of childhood thing being put into complete reverse, that you give me, just our relationship in itself gives me a degree of self-confidence, that I feel that the fact that you're my friend makes me feel better about myself. It's difficult to explain how that is the case or why it's the case, but yeah, I just and your social media presence and your just the way that you are personally so self-confident reflects on me as well. And I sort of, this is getting a bit odd, but I do sort of feel like I am now the cool kids at school because of you. And not just because of you and our friendship, but because of what you've made me physically. And that has had such a massive impact on my mentality. And it's made me realize that when you do have self-confidence, you completely change the way that you present yourself to other people. And this is what I try and do to my friends and colleagues, just to explain to them that they need to hold themselves in a certain way and not demean themselves. And just, as one of my colleagues years ago said to me, Graham, just feel the power of your own position. And I think that's really, really important to remember, that you have, as an individual, a lot of secret powers. And if you can, in a non-arrogant, non-judgmental way, just feel that confidence, it just comes across to other people. And people want to be around confident, happy people. They don't want to be around people that are sad, that feel insecure. And I think that's what I was like at school. And so I think the reason that I sort of, maybe wrong to say brought it upon myself, but in some ways I suppose I did. I mean, if you're some guy in school and you see this guy on the floor being beaten up and kicked by everybody else, do you want to be his mate? No, because you might be the next person kicked and beaten up by them.
The person you've become, what do you think people could do with understanding about that person? Because I think people have very different perceptions of you than who you actually are. You might not think that, but I actually think they do. So, who is G-Dog? Is really the question. And what do you think that people might misunderstand about you and the person you've become?
I think different groups of people will have different misunderstandings about everybody. And I think people that we meet in the gym will have a certain perception of me. My friends and family have another perception of me. My colleagues and clients will have another perception of me. So it's all different. And there's a small, very small group of people that know me truly in all these different aspects of my personality. And I think we all have different masks that we put on for different situations, right? You know, we have, it's like when we go to a party, or when we go to some sort of event. I think we've all stood outside the door of something we're about to walk into, took a deep breath and go, I am now this person. And then you walk into the room and you act like that person, even though you could have had a really bad day. And I spoke to a friend, really sad situation a couple of weeks ago, whose mother just almost died. And he committed himself to going to an event that night. And he'd been with his mother that afternoon, and she'd literally just almost died that day, but he couldn't get out of the event. And this was a big event with members of the royal family there and so on. And he knew that he just had to put on an act and pretend as if nothing had happened. And so he said he just stood outside of this hotel, took a deep breath, composed himself, went in and said, I'm now this other person. And just, I have to ignore the fact that I've almost faced my mother's death this morning. And I think we all will go through the situations where you just have to just bite your lip and move forward. And I think there's only a small group of people that know these things about all of us. And I've seen you in situations like that. You've seen me in situations like that. And yeah, different people have different perceptions. What do you think when you say people view me in a certain way? How do you think they view me?
I think people sometimes might not see the change in the warmth and the compassion and the emotional intelligence you've developed, and kind of can see you as this very successful, buff, kind of maybe like slightly like arrogant in some way individual. And obviously when they get to know you, or obviously when I talk about you, I see the complete opposite. I mean, that's natural in the way you present yourself on social media. And of course, there is a little bit of an act to some degree. And we are both very sarcastic. So if anyone listening to this podcast takes anything from it, I'd love them to understand that more.
Yeah, it's a
Do you
good
think
point.
that's fair?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you're right. I mean, but we on social media are obviously presenting the best version of ourselves. It's very rare that anyone on social media will actually say, I'm having a really bad day and I'm not training, my body feels terrible, et cetera, et cetera. It's not great content. And so,
other than the odd bit of banter.
Yeah. So obviously you need to be human and explain your vulnerabilities, but ultimately, you want to present yourself in the best way, and we're trying to motivate other people to become the best version of themselves, to focus on longevity, to focus on their bodies, their personal fitness, their mindset. And therefore, of course, we're going to present a very positive self-image on social media. That's what it's all about. And of course, I do try on some rare occasions to show some degree of vulnerability.
Big G.
Big G. And you're very good at bringing me down to earth. But I think you can't judge anybody by their social media appearance.
There are a lot of people who get to your age, and they'll be listening to this, some of them, who just believe they're too far gone. What message would you give to that person who is watching this and listening, but not doing?
In preparation for this, watched an interview with Bear Grylls yesterday on the High Performance podcast. He was interviewed in his living room, and it was really interesting. And they said, the interviewers said to Jake specifically, said to Bear, you're now 50 years old, so he's obviously 6 years younger than me. How do you think about the aging process and whatever, and your fitness and your inability to do things as you change and get older? And he said, I'm 25%. And they're like, what do you mean 25%? And he said, I think developments in medical science and AI over the next few years are going to mean we can live to 200. So I'm 25%. So I've just begun. And I think that's a great mentality to have. So if you are sitting there and thinking, I'm in my 50s, I've got a beer gut, my hair's fallen out, my skin's not great, a bit ruddy, drink so much beer, my face goes too red. But it doesn't matter because I'm probably going to die when I'm 80. So I might as well just have fun over the next 24 years. I think that's a terrible, terrible attitude for life. I think what you should say is, I can actually transform my body now. Look what I've done. I can transform my body. I can do everything that a 25-year-old can do if I want to and put my mind to it. And that means I can live way longer. And if Bear Grylls is right, and medical science is about to get us to 200 years old, then I've got to make sure that my skeleton, my muscle mass, my body is able to transform or to transport myself for the next 150 years. So I've got to work it, and I've got to make sure I'm strong. And at the same time, if you have a mentality that just because you're that age, you can't do the stuff you did when you're 25, I don't understand it. We in Barcelona, we're in Ibiza, I go to Paris for the weekend with my wife, I do loads of stuff. And I feel like I'm 25. I do not feel like I am 56 years old. Age literally is a number to me. I know that I am physically in the best shape of my entire life. When I look in the mirror now, naked, I look better than I did at any stage in my life. Guaranteed. My body is better now than it was at any stage in my life. And it's capable of doing things that it wasn't capable of doing at any other point in my life. And so the idea that in your 50s, your life is over, your body's over, your mind can go into a phase of decline. It's just such a waste.
Do you have any regrets?
I regret that I didn't realize what I've just said earlier. So if you're listening to this and you're 30 or 40, then take my advice and start thinking like this now.
A few years ago, I interviewed you in these exact same positions. And I asked you the question, why are you a winner? And you seemed in the answer to very much have this ability to not own the fact you're a winner, and said, if I say I'm a winner, then I'm almost accepting that I'm done. But I believe you're a winner. And I know plenty of the people listening to this podcast do. So why are you a winner? And you're not allowed to say because of what you said last time. I need you to say with confidence, because it's a self-belief question. Why do you think you're a winner?
I think I'm a winner because I've changed and I've adapted and I've learnt the power of adaptation. And I think in our discussion just now, I've shown you that I've learnt the process of permanent adaptation. And I think that over the next 150 years of my life, I now have the skills to permanently change. And I think that is anybody's superpower. If you have the mentality that if you don't like something, you can change it, then it's great for your mental health, because you know you always have a parachute. You've always got the ability to escape. You've always got the ability to prevent yourself from falling and crashing, because you can divert. You've calloused your brain into learning how to adapt to new situations. And anybody that's listening to this that feels trapped or stuck in life, just learn from the lessons I've just given, from being bullied at school, from feeling trapped in London, from being potentially made redundant at the age of 21, to relocating halfway around the world, to reinventing myself so many times over 40 years. It's easy if you put your mind to it.
Wow. G-Dog, thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm biased. Guys, thank you once again for tuning into Live for Life podcast. I hope those last couple of episodes have given you actually a real opportunity to get to know us more. And obviously, if you want to ask questions about those episodes, please do. We have more and more episodes to come. Obviously, we've been on video for multiple episodes now. Everything is developing in the most incredible way. And Jude, I just wanted to say thank you for this journey so far. I'm loving every moment.
Thank you to you. I mean, you've changed me. So
please like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.